So, I welcome you to the first lecture of this NPTEL MOOC course titled Psychology of Stress, Health and Well-being. Now, so this is the first lecture of the first week and it is module number 1. The module number 1 is titled as Stress, its nature and physiology. So, in this module we will have 3 lectures. So, today we will start with the first lecture. The first lecture here I will give you an overview of this course very briefly, and I will talk about nature of stress, first part. Now, as the name suggests, this is a course of psychology and it is specifically tailored to understand the phenomena of stress, health and well-being and interrelationship among all these concepts. Now, before I go into the overview of this course, let me give you a brief idea about what psychology is all about, because many students taking this course may not be aware of psychology. So, I will just give you a very brief idea about what psychology is all about, so that you can understand what is this discipline is, what are the contents of this discipline. So, one of the basic definition of psychology is that psychology is the science or scientific study of behavior and mental processes. So, there are 3 terms we need to understand. One is scientific study, one is behavior and one is mental processes. Now, psychology claims to be a scientific discipline. What is the meaning of a scientific study or scientific discipline? So, any study, any field of study that uses a scientific method for seeking knowledge or gathering information, it can be called as a scientific discipline. So, scientific method is the key term. So, we have pure sciences such as physics, chemistry, biology, we have social sciences such as psychology, sociology, etc. So, the idea is all this discipline uses scientific method to get information and basically to seek truths and knowledge in the area of that discipline. Now, scientific method seeks truth through observed evidences and not through authority, ideologies, tradition, where it can be very subjective knowledge. So, it tries to seek knowledge through observed evidences. Now, to be truly scientific, there are certain hallmarks of scientific study. To be truly call some discipline as scientific study, there are certain characteristics which are very important. So, one is obviously systematic observation. So, systematic observation basically means it seeks knowledge or information using systematic observation. That means, it is not using selective or random observation. So, when you conclude something based on selective or random observation, it can be biased, it may not be true. So, scientific method uses systematic observation to come to a conclusion. Empiricism, the idea of empiricism is another important term that is used in the context of scientific method. Empiricism basically means when we seek information or knowledge using our sense organs. So, that is related to our observation. So, we seek knowledge using our sense organs. So, scientific method or science will not study anything that is not detected by using our sense organs. So, science will not talk about something beyond observation of our sense organs. So, paranormal, mysterious thing probably. So, those empiricism basically means that it can be observed using our sense organs or detected using our sense organ, 5 sense organs, either directly or by enhancing using our certain instruments, methods such as telescope, microscope, etc. Another important characteristics of science is objectivity. Now, we all have many biases within us, and those biases may kind of create an obstacle while seeking information or knowledge in any area of discipline, because I may personally think some information or some ideas as right which may not be right, simply because I personally think so, which is my subjective interpretation. So, objectivity is basically in the pursuit of objectivity, basically researcher find ways to gather information that are not influenced by their own biases or subjective biases. So, objectivity makes, it helps you to collect factual knowledge, and subjective knowledge basically changes from person to person depending on his ideas and biases. So, at least in the scientific method, the researchers tries to minimize subjectivity and maximize objectivity. This is very important characteristics. And the third characteristics of scientific method is replicability or verifiability, which is very important because there is no foolproof ways for social sciences particularly which guarantees pure objectivity in terms of gathering information. That is why verifiability is very important. So, that is why people publish research in the journals, so that people can use those methods and verify your findings whether they are true or not. If you just find out something and no other people is able to find out the same result using those same method, then we cannot call it as truly objective or truly as a part of the discipline or scientific or science. So, replicability is very important. It has to be verifiable, it has to be replicable by using whatever method you have used. Then only we can call it as a kind of true factual knowledge, and can become a part of scientific discipline. So, these are very important characteristics of scientific discipline. So, when we say psychology as a scientific study, with the idea that psychology tries to use all these characteristics to gather its information, and all the contents that we study in psychology are basically are concluded using those scientific methods. Now, psychology studies behavior. So, behavior basically, technically we use this term in psychology to understand or to mean basically any actions that are observable and that can be measured. So, all the actions that we can see that a person is performing an action, whatever, speaking, walking, whatever it is, all the observable actions which can be measured using some method, all these are called as behaviors in psychology. Mental processes is a broad term which basically includes diverse activities of human mind such as perception, thinking, memory, imagination, etc., etc. So, all these are collectively called as mental processes, and psychology tries to understand all these mental processes, behaviors. Psychology also looks into human emotions and how it is influenced by our thought processes, etc., etc. So, briefly if I want to say, psychology is a discipline that tries to study diverse aspects or dimensions of human behavior, mental processes. So, since it is a very complex field of study, this discipline is a multifaceted discipline just like other disciplines. So, it has many sub branches. For example, we have clinical psychology that looks at mental disorders and treatments. Then we have organizational behavior, which looks at how human behave in the group situations or in the organizational situations. Then we have social psychology, which looks at human behavior in the context of social settings. So, we have many such sub-disciplines within psychology to understand specific areas of human behavior. So, now as we have already as I have told you that this is a course of psychology specifically tailored to understand stress, health and well-being. So, let me give you an overview of this course. So, this course will systematically address the issues related to psychology of stress, health and well-being. In the initial level, this course will discuss the concepts of stress, health and coping processes, how we experience stress and how it is related to human mental and physical health, and what are the coping processes, how can we cope with different difficulties of our life, stressful situations of our life. So, specifically we will address following questions in this initial few sections, such as what is the mechanism by which our mind creates stress. So, we will try to understand deeply what are the mental processes by which we create stress in our mind. Then we will also look at is there a connection between our mind and body? Can stressful experiences cause physical diseases such as heart disease? Can stress influence our immune system? So, basically we will look at how stress is connected to physical health. So, this is also very important. We will see the mind body interaction in the context of stress. We will also discuss, are there any positive dimensions of stress? So, we will also look at, is stress always negative or there are many positive aspects to it? We will also look into those aspects. We will also discuss what are healthy and unhealthy coping strategies for stress management. So, these are also very important. We use many coping strategies in our day to day life. Some are healthy, some are unhealthy. So, we will look into all these aspects, and we will also address, are there any evidence based coping strategies that can be used by us. So, we will look into many healthy coping strategies that we can use in the context of stressful situations, traumatic situations. In the next level of this course, we will discuss what lies beyond stress and coping paradigm. So, we will not just talk about stress and coping, we will also talk about ideas which are beyond stress and coping paradigm, such as positive mental health, happiness and well-being will be discussed in this course also. So, the psychology of happiness and well-being fills these gaps in the area of stress and health by providing understanding how can we move beyond managing stress and achieve greater sense of happiness and well-being and a flourishing and a meaningful life. So, in this connection we will try to address some of the important questions, such as what is happiness, what makes us happy, do we really know what makes us happy. So, these are very important questions that we will address in this course. We will also address questions such as, can we become happier? What are the barriers in achieving sustainable happiness? Is it possible to become happier, or can we increase the level of our happiness? So, these are the very important applied questions that we will address in this course. We will also see, are there any evidence based happiness enhancing strategies, activities or intervention that we can apply in our life to increase the level of happiness. We will also address, is happiness sufficient for our well-being, or should we look for some other aspects also, other dimensions of human well-being, such as meaning and purpose in life. So, all these aspects we will discuss in this course, and I believe this course will be a very applied and interesting course for all people who are interested into their health, happiness and well-being. So, we will try to make it as applied as possible, so that we understand various important aspects of our life. So, now we will formally start the content of this course. So, the first concepts that we will discuss in this course is the nature of stress. So, we will talk about nature of stress in 2 lectures. So, I will talk the nature of stress first part today, and the next lecture will talk nature of stress second part in the next lecture. So, some of the key concepts that we will discuss under nature of stress. Key concepts are, why stress related problem is a global epidemic, why is it important to understand the dynamics of stress in our life, what is psychological stress. So, this is very important, in order to understand diverse aspect of stress, first we need to understand the definition of stress. We will also look at what are the mental processes involved in the stress response. So, how our mind creates stress. So, we will try to understand and address in this lecture, and also we will look at what are the different characteristics, types and sources of stress. This we will address in the next lecture. So I will start with one question that have you ever experienced the following symptoms before or after an event, such as forgetfulness, confusion, inability to concentrate, constant worrying, irritability, moodiness, loneliness, isolation, sleeping too much or too little, eating more or less, procrastinating, excessive drinking of alcohol or smoking or drugs, frequent cold, headache, chest pain, etc. So, if you have experienced some of these symptoms, one most important possibility is that you are experiencing stressful events in your life. So, as a response to stress, mostly we experience all these symptoms or some of these symptoms. Now, we will talk about stress as a global epidemic. Now WHO dubbed stress as a health epidemic of the 21st century, simply because this is a global phenomena and it is constantly rising. At present, as we know, for example, COVID is a pandemic where it is a global phenomena. So, similarly, stress is a global phenomena and it is rising everywhere. So, it is not just a local phenomena. So, that is why it is kind of dubbed as global pandemic, because its influence is everywhere. Its influence can be seen everywhere. So, there are many staggering statistics available in terms of rising stress and its implications in various countries. So, I will just discuss few of them. One is, in the context of America, stress is estimated to cost around $300 billion per year, and there is an increase in the stress level of about 10 to 30% between 1983 to 2009. So, this is one of the statistics which shows how rapidly it is increasing and how much cost it is a country has to bear because of this rise of stress level in terms of its impact on health and well-being of the people. So, we will look into all these dimensions in more detail. In the context of India, recently in 2019, a global well-being study conducted by Cigna Corporation, it reported that about 82% of Indians are suffering from stress on account of work, health and finance related concerns, which is higher than other developed and emerging countries such as USA, UK, Germany, France and Australia. So, this is in the context of India, the situation is also very bad, and in some context it is much more than even developed countries. Now, there is a huge consequences of such rising stress in terms of its devastating impact on multiple dimensions of our life, such as health, well-being and our functionings of our life. So, it has negative impact in our health, our well-being and functionings of our life, such as physical health, mental health, performance, productivity, quality of personal and social life, etc. And it is accounting for a significant burden of disability within nations. So, there can be many reasons for such rises, and there can be some local reason, some specific reason connected to a person's life, but in general one of the major global reason is rapidly changing world. Our world is rapidly changing and it is causing disruptions, and any disruption and changes forces us to adjust to the new environment, and adjustment causes some kind of, and such changes forces us to adjust and experience stress. So, those rapid changes is happening everywhere, even at our lifestyle level, of our job level, at our global level, at our society level. So, at all the levels there are rapidly changing situations that we are encountering, and such changes forces us to adjust to this new environment, and stress is a natural consequence of such changes. But obviously, there can be individual specific reasons for stress and so many things. So, this is but one general reason, that is why globally it is becoming a pandemic, a kind of global epidemic. So, therefore, it is very important to understand the dynamics of stress in our life, because it has far reaching implications in our health, well-being, our functionings, our quality of life. So, without understanding these dynamics of stress in our life, we will not be able to lead a productive and flourishing life. So, to lead a productive and flourishing life, we need to understand all these dynamics of stress. Therefore, it is important to understand and reflect on all these issues. So, this particular course, we are basically trying to understand that from going through the literature of psychology and what psychology has understood about stress, health and well-being. So, we will try to understand all these diverse aspects throughout this course. Now, before we can really understand the diverse aspect of stress, we need to understand what is stress. Now, stress is a very commonly used word and may mean many things to many people. So, if you look at the literature of psychology, obviously, in order to understand stress and its implication, it is important to understand what is the meaning of stress when we discuss it in the field of psychology. Now, there are many definitions even within the psychology also about the stress. So, all these definitions can be categorized into three broad categories. One is called as stimulus based definition of stress, second is called as response based definition of stress, and third is called interactional definition of stress. So, we will try to understand what are these three categories of stress definitions. So, first is a stimulus based definition of stress. So, stimulus is any external event, person or circumstances that causes a reaction within us. So, any external situations, event, things that causes a reaction within us can be called as a stimulus. For example, now you may be looking at your mobile screen or computer screen. So, there is a stimulus because it is kind of causing some internal reactions. You are thinking about something, or it is stimulating some thinking processes, thought processes. So, stimulus based definition of stress basically defines stress as an environmental stimulus which causes a strain reaction in the individual exposed to the stressful situation. So, here stress is defined as a stimulus, as an external stimulus that causes a strain reaction within the individual. So, external stimulus is seen as a stress which causes a strain reaction within that person. So, for example, if you are stressed by an upcoming examination, so examination will be kind of considered as a main agent of stress. So, here stress will be looked from that external event. So, this type of definition came from basically because these are mostly at the initial level, these definitions were popular, and it came from the disciplines such as physics and engineering, where a substance is said to be under the stress when the external load produces a distorting force inside the substance called strain. So, such kind of definitions were popular in the science such as physics and engineering disciplines. So, from there psychology also borrowed such definition of stimulus based definition of stress. So, here stress is primarily viewed as a demand from the external environment. One such definition was given by Simmons in 1947. He defined stress is that which happens to the man, not that which happens in him. It is a set of causes and not a set of symptoms. So, this was the idea, and it was mostly at the initial phase of research such definitions were popular, and primarily because they were borrowed from the physics and engineering discipline. However, such definitions are no longer popular, primarily because this definition is very narrow and limiting. So, we will see why it is narrow and limiting in the other categories of definitions. Another set of definition that came, which can be collectively called as response based definition of stress. Now, a response based definition of stress is kind of looks at stress as a response within that individual and not as a stimulus as it was conceptualized in the stimulus based definition. So, response based definitions focus on the response to the stressful stimuli as the actual stress itself. So, that response, whatever that response that happens as an external stimuli, stress is considered as that response. The response is primarily viewed in terms of physiological response. So, in those definition, primarily the response was seen as a physiological response. What happens to your body at the physiological level? So, heartbeat increases, some chemical changes happens. So, all these were primarily looked at as a response in those definitions. So, one of the most popular definition of this category was given by Hans Selye in 1974. He was one of the founding researcher in the area of stress. He defined stress is the non-specific response of the body to any demand made upon it. So, he said stress consists of response of the body, non-specific response, some general response that happens to your body as some demands are made from an external environment. Similar to stimulus based definition, a response based definition of stress are also no longer popular, primarily because they are also limiting and focus is narrow. Then we have the third category of definition of stress, which are called as interactional definitions of stress. Here it is a kind of combination of both stimulus based and response based definition, and it defines stress as interaction between the person and the environment. Stress is an outcome of interaction between the person and the environment. So, it is neither seen as a stimulus nor seen as an only response. It is more like an interaction between these two. It is a result of interaction. So, one of such popular definition in this category is proposed by Richard Lazarus and Susan Folkman in 1984, which is one of the most cited definition of stress. It defines stress is a particular relationship between the person and the environment that is appraised by the person as taxing or exceeding his or her resources and endangering his or her well-being. So, the basic idea is stress is here seen as an kind of interaction between the person and his environment, and when that person interprets this environmental situation as taxing or something that he will not be able to deal with, then stress is the response that happens as a result of this interaction. So, this definition is more process oriented and it accounts for the dynamic nature of stress, not just a static concept of stress. So, nowadays if you see in the literature of psychology, the most popular definition of stress are basically interactional definition of stress. So, these are if you see stress definition of stress in psychology, it will be mostly from the interactional perspective, and it is the most popular definition and most accepted definition at present. Now, this perspective look at stress as subjective phenomena simply because it includes interpretation of the event. So, it is a subjective phenomena because of individual interpretation is involved in it. Now, so let us just kind of summarize that. And so, when we conceptualize stress or talk about stress in psychology, we are typically talking about stress as the experience or the condition that results when we interpret or explain a situation being more than our coping resources can handle. So, whenever we interpret a situation as something that is more than our ability of coping resources or more than more than our coping abilities. So, stress is a result of that. So, whenever I interpret that I will not be able to deal with a situation, that situation becomes stressful for us. So, that is the basic idea of stress. So, stress is kind of when perceived situation is considered as a greater than our personal coping resources. So, this is the basic idea of stress when we talk about it in psychology. Now, one of the aspect we have already talked about is that stress is a subjective experience, simply because a given situation can be stressful for one person and it may not be stressful for another person. So, if you put, let us say, 5 person in a particular stressful situation, some individual may experience high stress, some may feel low stress, some may not feel stressed at all. Why these individual differences is primarily because these individuals are interpreting the situation differently. So, that is why it is called a subjective response, or it is a result of subjective interpretation. So, for example, appearing in an examination can be stressful for some student, and it may not be that stressful for another student. It depends on how that person is, or that student is interpreting the examination. If he thinks I am well prepared and I can do well, it will not be that stressful. On the other hand, if a student interprets examination as something which is, he will not be able to score good marks because he is not prepared, then it is more likely to be stressful. So, this difference is coming because two students are interpreting the examination differently. So, we are stressed by different kinds of things, and there is nothing wrong or bad to feel stressed in a situation when someone else doesn't. So, if someone else is not feeling stress in a situation and I am feeling stress, there is nothing wrong in it, because it all depends on that person's interpretation processes. Because another person is not experiencing stress in a situation simply because that situation is not relevant for that person, and it may be very relevant for me. That is why I am experiencing more stress. So, all these individual differences may be there when we talk about stress. So, what makes something stressful? The amount of stress each person experiences depends on his or her understanding, belief about a situation or event. So, when we interpret a situation, obviously it depends on many things, our understanding of the situation, our beliefs about the situations, all this will influence the stress response and our interpretation process. So, different things are stressful for different people, largely because the meaning of the event differs from person to person. People have different resources available for dealing with stressful situations. So, one thing is obviously interpretation of the situation itself, and another thing is interpretation of how much resources you have to handle a situation. So, we will look into that part also. So, so these interpretation processes are very important. In most of the situation, this interpretation process could be it could be unconscious and automatic, because of our habits, past habits. So, you see a situation and automatically you experience stress, because those interpretation could be very ingrained in your mind, unconscious mind, and it can be very automatic and unconscious and habitual. So, many times you may not see all this interpretation going on in your mind simply because it is happening very fast and at the unconscious level. So, there is a good news in that, simply because if stress is happening because of our interpretation process, one thing is that we can change that interpretation process. So, we will look into how we can change all these interpretation processes in the coping section when we discuss coping strategies. Now, cognitive appraisals of stress. So, this is the next concept. Basically, as we said, stress depends on our interpretation process. So, cognitive appraisals basically means assessment or interpretation. So, we will see little bit more detail in little bit more technical ways how this interpretation happens and what are the different types of interpretation that happens when we experience a stressful situation. So, appraisal of stress explains how different individuals have different reactions. So, as we have already seen or try to understand that different people react to same situation in different ways. So, cognitive appraisals can explain these differences. Some people may find an event as stressful, others may find it exciting, and some other people may be unaffected by an event. So, all these diverse reaction can happen. Same situation may be very stressful for one person, it may be exciting for another person, it may not be or a person may be unaffected by that same situation. So, it all depends on that individual differences. For example, giving a public lecture or public speaking. So, if you want to give a speech in front of people, it could be in the schools or it could be in any other forums. Some individual may find it very stressful event simply because he is interpreting public speaking as a threat, because he may think that I may not be able to speak properly, I may fumble, I may or what others will think about me. All this interpretation process will make this public speaking event for one person very stressful. The same event another person can see it as an opportunity or as a challenge to grow or challenge to show one skill, and he may feel excited about it. So, this can happen. So, all this diverse reaction can happen, and it is happening because of all these differences in the appraisal of the event. Richard Lazarus gave a model of details model of this interpretation process or appraisal. So, we will just look into that. So, Lazarus and Folkman 1984, they proposed a 3 cognitive appraisal process in the stress reaction model, and they said there are 3 appraisal process. One is primary appraisal, one is secondary appraisal, and third is reappraisal. So, what is primary appraisal? In the primary appraisal, here basically people judge a particular event or situation as either positive or negative. So, at the initial level, whenever you encounter a situation, so we judge that situation as positive or negative. So, that interpretation is called as primary appraisal. Now, this primary appraisal can, in the process of primary appraisal, a situation can be judged in terms of potential harm, loss, threat or challenge. So, particularly when we interpret a situation as stressful, you can interpret a situation as either irrelevant, it will not have much influence on you when you interpret a situation as irrelevant for me, or you interpret a situation as relevant but not threatening for you. So, for example, I say examination. So, you are fully prepared for it. So, it is relevant for you, but it is not threatening for you because you are fully prepared for it. So, it will not be that stressful. Then, when you experience or interpret an event as stressful, particularly because an event becomes stressful when we make judgment in terms of harm, loss, threat or challenge. So, these 3 interpretation particularly is associated with stressful experiences. So, harm loss basically is appraisals of primarily related to past experience and the present experience. When you see some kind of loss or damage that is happening or has already happened because of an event. So, it could be losses in terms of loss of money, job or even psychological loss such as self-esteem, loss of self-esteem. So, you may, when harm loss interpretation is there, stress is a natural outcome. Threat appraisal primarily happens and it is mostly future oriented interpretation. So, when you see a future possibility of harm loss, then it is called as a threat. For example, there is an upcoming presentation for you in your organization or in your job situation, and you may see is a very threatening event simply because if you interpret it that a bad presentation may hamper his future possibility of promotion, then it will be a threatening event for him. Challenge appraisal is very different actually. Here basically person see a possibility for growth and gain from a situation. So, I see it as a challenge simply because I see it there is an opportunity for growth in that area. So, it is not so easy, but it is not impossible also for me. So, there is a challenge here, but it will help me to grow. So, it is not typically stress in that context, but it is more in the positive direction because it motivates people in the right direction. So, threat appraisal generally evokes negative emotions such as anxiety, fear and anger, but challenge appraisal evokes feelings of excitement, eagerness and exhilarations. So, there is a kind of positive aspects to challenge appraisal also. Now, the threat and challenge appraisal may differ depending on the personal characteristics of the person. Sometimes, people with low self-esteem may see even promotion as a positive event such as promotion as a threat, because he may think, if I get promoted, will I be able to deal with the newer demands of that job, whereas other persons may see promotion as opportunity for growth and show one's capabilities, etc. So, it depends on personal what kind of individual you are, what are the thought processes that you kind of use in a particular situation. Then comes secondary appraisal. So, after the primary appraisal, when you judged a situation as positive or negative or stressful, then the interpretation happens, whether you have the necessary resources to deal with that situation. So, that is called as secondary appraisal. Evaluation or assessment of your resources. When I say resources, I basically mean, do you have the necessary skills to deal with the situation? Do you have the necessary, support system in terms of social support to deal with the situation? Do you have the necessary material resources such as money to deal with the situation? So, all these are called resources. So, then you interpret, do you have the necessary resources to deal with that situation? So, secondary appraisal is about that. For example, in an interview situation, once you see that it can be a threatening situation, then after the primary appraisal, you may judge, do I have the necessary skills to face an interview? Do I have the necessary knowledge about the subject or communication skills to appear, or give a proper interview? So, if you have all these skills, probably you will feel much less stress as compared to somebody who thinks he is having not enough of these skills. So, coping processes will be again discussed in detail in the upcoming lectures. Then stress reappraisal is the third process, where you do reassessment based on the ongoing feedback from the situation, which may have further consequences. So, during the event or after the event, you do reassessment how you have done in that situation. So, that is called as reappraisal, again making an appraisal of what happened based on the feedback from the situation. So, this whole three processes can be diagrammatically shown like this. So, let us say it is using an example of public speech. So, primary appraisal, you just judge this event of public speaking, whether it is positive or negative. So, in the primary appraisal, you may say, it is not a problem because I have given many speeches before. So, you will not be feel that stressed. But let us say in the primary appraisal level, you say, I have never given a speech before, I might freeze, what will happen, I do not know. So, you are kind of interpreting that situation as threatening. So, it is more likely to have stressful consequences. So, in the first part, because you are in the secondary level, you can say there is no threat because I have the necessary skills to and the knowledge to talk about it. So, in the secondary level also there is no issue. So, in that case there will not be much stress. However, in the second case where you have interpreted it as a threatening event, in the secondary level you may interpret that I may mix up words and lose track, I am not skilled enough, I do not have the necessary skill to give a public speech. So, it is again likely to increase the stress. And in the reappraisal, again you may say, for example, the speech did not go well, but at least it is over now. So, you may feel little relaxed because how you are assessing based on the feedback, reassessing again. Or you may stress may still continue when you may say, I did not do well, next time I will have to practice more, so that it does not happen, similar thing does not happen again. So, all these things may happen at the reappraisal phase based on the feedback of the situation, how you are assessing again, and based on that there may be consequences. So, all these diverse assessment or calculations may take place consciously or unconsciously in our mind, resulting in the stressful experiences. So, you can do this small exercise next time when you experience stress. Probably you can look at your mind and observe what kind of primary appraisal, what kind of secondary appraisal, and what kind of reappraisal you are doing as a response to that event. So, probably you will become more conscious of all these processes and may find some relevance and connection with this model. So, with this I will end today's lecture. Thank you.